So what else is going on?
I'm cheating and I'm looking at the topic for today's
Nice.
session. I rarely do that. I usually try to go in cold, but it is what it is. I don't know, just it's weird. As with through the pandemic, the holidays have been weird. We're creeping up on Halloween here, and like, just not in the mood. Like, we're still trying to figure out what the kids are going to dress up as, and if they even want to dress up. And it's like, yeah. And I thought last year, I'm like, I've got the hair. I got to go Jesus this year,
That would be good.
Find a robe, some sandal. I've got some old Birkenstocks that would work great.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's holidays. I don't know about you, but holidays have just been weird.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're kind of getting back into the swing of things with it. So I have to finish my costume. So we're going Paw Patrol themed.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. The 2-year-old.
Yeah.
He's going to be the main character. I'm one of the adult characters. So Suzanne's dressing up. So I figured it'd be fun.
Chase, Marshall,
Zuma, Sky,
yeah.
Rubble.
There you go. There you go. You're more closer to it than I am. It was huge here a couple years ago, so I still remember. So
I've caught myself humming the Paw Patrol theme.
Yeah, it's very catchy.
Yeah, like I catch myself like, and I'll be doing it all day, and it's like Suzanne will be like, "Are you singing Paw Patrol?"
Yes. Yeah, you got a problem with that? I mean, don't worry about it. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
But I'm telling you, I joke with some friends of mine. I'm like, they've got the '80s cartoon / 25-minute toy commercial thing down to a science with that show.
Oh yeah, yeah. They have the framework to make that thing go. Yeah. Yep. Well, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
That will be fun. I've always wanted to like dress up the outside of the house, and like every year I'm like, okay, next year I'm going to do it, and then it creeps up on me, and it's like next year I'm going to do it, and I never do it. But I've got this waterfall out in front of my house, this like water feature.
Is it still voice activated, by the way?
It is voice activated. Yeah. Alexa, turn on the waterfall. Yeah. It's still voice activated. But nice. one year I put a bunch of dry ice in it, and it created this like spooky kind of, foggy, and I'm like, that was really cool, but it was expensive to keep it going. So I thought I should just buy a fog machine, kind of put it behind the waterfall, and then have the fog kind of flow down the river, and it would be a cool scene. And then one year, Corey Spencer, who was at Adobe for a long time and really the kind of mind behind Launch, I think he's over at Alteryx now. He had this rear projection system in his front window where he hung up a white sheet, and then he had this image projected on it of like this like killer stalking people in the house, and you could just see the shadow projected on the curtain, and then he had a soundtrack that went behind it. It was so cool. And I'm like, if I could set something like that up, get the fog machine rolling outside. Anyway, I think what we've settled on doing is we've got a storm drain right out in front of the house. Is we're going to tie a red helium balloon to that, and have a mask of Pennywise down inside the storm drain, peeking out through it. So I think I'll try to at least pull that off.
Nice. That would be cool.
Yeah. So anyway, that is that. I just am excited that I found out that Tootsie Roll sells. Do you remember? So as a kid, and this will maybe date me, but it seems like these are coming back. One of my favorite candies was the flavored mini Tootsie Roll.
I don't remember those.
Oh, I gotta look it up now because let's see, mini Roll flavors, and it came in a variety pack. It was okay. So chocolate. No, this isn't it. Is this it? Chocolate cherry grape? No, I don't remember that many flavors. Those are Tootsie Pops. Old time candy. Now I feel old. Cherry cherry, orange, lime. I don't know what that one is, and vanilla. And the vanilla was in this blue wrapper. And my favorite thing to do was to find the houses that were giving those out. They'd always usually give out a handful of them. And then I'd get home and I'd throw everything out but the vanilla. The vanilla mini Tootsie Rolls are amazing. But you had to sort through all these, like, I don't want lime and gross. But now I found out you can buy a bag of just the vanilla. Oh.
I don't remember those. You know, and I mean, they could have been around at the time. I just don't. No, I'm not that much younger than you.
All right, I'm going to send you a link to what they look like.
Yeah, I just searched for them.
Can I put this in the chat? Yeah, you see the, like, yeah. So it's the blue one, the vanilla one. Amazing. Yeah. Anyway, I digress.
Nice.
I digress. I'm not much of a candy fan, but I do like licorice and like gummy type of candies. And my 6-year-old is having a meltdown about going to school. Anyway, now you're caught up to date. I'm a little taken aback that these are labeled old time candy. I will really date myself here. So my grandparents' house, they lived 2 blocks off the main street in the city they lived in, and down at the corner was a gas station, a convenience store. And I remember walking down there, and they had what seemed at the time as a child like this whole row of these glass containers that each had different types of candies, like, you know, Sour Patch Kids and like little cherry balls and like different candies that were called 1-cent candies.
Okay.
Where each individual unit, so if you got 10 Sour Patch Kids, did you remember Sour Patch Kids?
I do remember Sour Patch Kids, yes.
So if you got 10 Sour Patch Kids out of there, then it was 10 cents. Like each individual candy was a penny. But the crazy thing was that would never fly today is like these bins were just like open. Like you would reach in and like, oh, grab, like, you know, people putting their hands into each of these bins. Thinking back on it, I'm like, this is pretty gross, you know. But as a kid, man, I loved going to that store and just getting a bag and just mixing and matching because they were all a penny. So I'd make my own little, you know, variety pack of 1-cent candies.
Nice. And the dog's barking in the background.
Dog is crazy. This dog has like a what is it? A protection, a motherly instinct. So speaking of my dog, and she's I think better now. She went through phantom pregnancy, which I didn't know was a thing. So she just came out of her first heat about 6 weeks ago. And she was just kind of moping around the house and crying and like acting like she was looking for something. And now she's protecting the house from some intruder. And then she adopted 2 of her longtime favorite toys. She adopted them as babies. And so she would grab them in her mouth and carry them around the house, kind of crying, looking for the other babies. And then she'd make a little bed with like blankets or something and put her toy in the blanket.
Interesting. I've never heard of that.
And I'm like, what the heck is she doing? And finally, after talking to some people and looking it up online, I discovered there's this thing where some dogs go through this thing called phantom pregnancy, where they go through their heat. They think that they had a litter of puppies and now they can't find their babies.
Them. Interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, that's been fun. Anyway, she's crazy.
Yeah,
she is crazy.
She's protecting you from the Amazon delivery guy.
Which is a whole other topic about how much of a consumer I realized I am. Where like one of the delivery trucks is stopping here at least every day of the week.
Yeah, we're that person on the block. I mean, 5 out of 7 days a week, we've got a package on the front steps.
Yeah, I am the same.
All right. So yeah, I don't have a segue again this week. So let's just go right
Let's
into
do it.
our topic, why people are actually tuning in and not just us, BSing for 10 minutes so far.
Right.
So I want to continue our discussion around the concept of writing for the brand. So we talked about it last week. It's one of the tenets of the code of the West. And this week I want to dig into part of it being loyalty. And that's really one of the core tenets of the concept of writing for the brand. And one of the things we talked about last week and we dug into when dissecting that concept is, yes, loyalty is involved, but it's not this blind loyalty. Not just being loyal to someone who cuts you a check. It's being loyal to someone who respects the craft as you do, and all of those details. So as I was writing this up, I was starting to think, what has happened to loyalty? Loyalty of employee to employer, and then all the other way around, employer to employee. When you look at the business world today, it feels like every relationship is one of convenience. There's no loyalty beyond the idea of, well, what have you done for me lately? It doesn't matter what you've done before, how much effort, time, value you've provided. What have you done for me lately? So I want to talk about like real, genuine loyalty. And to kick us off, I thought I'd start with a story. And yeah, my parents have told me this multiple times. Like when my dad first, my dad's been retired 8 years now, but when my dad first started working, he was a machinist by trade, and ultimately got to the point where when he retired, he was running the machine shop floor. But when he started with this company, it was owned, it was privately owned. It's when he retired, it was a major conglomerate or part of a major conglomerate. But when he had started, it was privately owned. The owner was present, and not just kind of like in his office overlooking things, but like present on the floor. My mom talks about how not only did he make an effort to know all of his employees, he knew stuff about them. He knew their spouses' names, at times even their children's names, things like that, so he could at least greet them. And there's that feeling of a personal nature to the relationship. It wasn't just one of monetary exchange, one of convenience. And for the most part, like that feeling is gone. And I know and that's also not easy. That's the one thing that makes it worthwhile is taking that level of effort to care for your employees, or or those you work with, knowing those kind of details. It's not easy. It's quite hard, especially depending upon the size of the company, the size of your team, and whatnot. So when I think of loyalty, I think of that story that my dad has told me about, the way things were when he started working, and then the way things were when he retired.
Yeah, and so there is a lot to unpack here. Hold on, I'm going to let the dog in. Apparently, I'm the only one here, and she's freaking out that she was left behind. And hopefully she will be good. Yeah, I think there's so many directions that we can take this, and that for one, it's a different, it's just a different era, right? It's a different mindset. And that era where you worked for one company and you retired and you got the gold watch and the pension, it just is is out of favor, right? It just doesn't really exist. And sure, there are pockets where it exists here and there, but it just doesn't really exist anymore. The problem is that from a management perspective, we've kept that mindset in. Hey, you're home? Or did everyone else go?
Went to the store.
Oh, okay. Well,
Love it.
apparently there is still life.
We have a surprise guest today.
We have a surprise guest. But the problem is that from a management perspective, we haven't let go of that thought. Like, we know that it's transient, yet from a management perspective, we don't accept it as transient. And it's created this really weird dynamic. And so I think we just have to accept that, employees just don't work for the same company for 40 years and retire. And we have to change our mindset and how we view things and how we curate those relationships. So that is number one. Number two, I think a huge problem in that shift, as we're talking about loyalty, is loyalty has shifted to Wall Street. And so it's when our loyalty is to Wall Street, it's really difficult for an employee to be loyal to a company, and for a company to be loyal to the employee, because their vested interest is elsewhere. And again, I think it's difficult for us to admit that is a very true reality of the world we live in. And if we can't admit it, we can't address the impacts of what that has. Because if you think back to your dad's generation, your grandpa's generation, it was a different world and a different mindset, right? And when you had a business and you had employees, you thought of them as family, right? And now that notion gets attacked and people call it toxic. But if you go back and watch, movies from the 50s or 60s, and there's an employment component to it, there's this whole concept that it's a family and you treat them like a family. I watched my grandpa. So my grandpa, for most of his career, worked as an industrial engineer in a U.S. steel mill. But on the side, and then after he retired, he opened up a gift shop. It was a Hallmark shop. And he had 3 employees, and I watched him treat every one of those employees like they were part of his family. Right. And if an employee had, a family member, so they were sick, or like, I would watch him treat them and take care of that. And it's like, okay, like, this is how families operate. And it was just this amazing thing to see. We don't have that anymore because we've made everything transactional. And again, our loyalty isn't to the employer or the employee, it's to Wall Street. And so I think it's very difficult to ask for that loyalty when that loyalty lies elsewhere. And I'm kind of spinning around in circles around this topic, but I think that that's really where the challenge lies. And it's an interesting conversation that this is our topic today, because on Twitter, I spun up a conversation yesterday asking about, who is the best boss that you ever worked for? And so much of the feedback was centered around like this humanistic component. I had this boss that like cared as me as a human. Like they knew like days I was struggling and how to address it. And, I had a family member die and my boss like flew out to the funeral and I didn't even know he was going to show up. And it just meant so much to me. It's like, those things that should just be commonplace because that's how humans treat each other are what now defines a great boss, because we've removed that human component from the relationship.
You made me think of something, because you started off the conversation talking about how like holidays are, you're kind of out of sync with the holidays right now because of the pandemic, and then you mentioned loyalty moving to Wall Street. And this could just be kind of a bias that I'm seeing based on people I talk to, but I get the feeling that, and it ties into what we're talking about here, people are starting to realize that like their employment is no, they were getting lip service from their company, where you see people like when the minute the pandemic hit, they, people, a lot of the employees were the first ones to go. And I get this feeling, and it's not one single thing I can point to, but I feel that there is this movement to move away, and maybe it's small, maybe it's a bit more underground, to move back more toward like the small privately owned companies and the move away from the conglomerates.
Maybe.
Yeah. And I mean, like, are the conglomerates going away anytime soon? Is Amazon going away? No. Is Apple going away? No. Is Disney going away? No. And that's what I'm saying. It could just be a bias on my side based on some of the information I'm consuming. But I've kind of gotten this feeling, and it may just be small at the moment. And part of it could just be my desire too, like this movement back to like the small privately owned businesses where, like you have people that are working together mastering a craft and not necessarily just going in to punch a time clock.
I agree in theory. I think what's left to be seen is, are people going to do well? We need to evaluate this based on what people do and not based on what people say. And the reason I bring that up, and again, I find the timing of this topic so interesting, because there have been so many conversations I've been having this week that are pinpointed exactly around this topic. So I'll share a story. The other day I was talking with a good friend of mine who runs a large analytics team for an analytics consultancy, who we share a lot of the same thoughts and beliefs about running a business and doing it a different way and being more humanistic and focused, as treating people like a mom, as you would as from a mom and pop employer. And he was really despondent. And he said, in the height of the pandemic, all these big consultancies that are competitors of ours, they let all these people go. They trimmed the fat, quote unquote. They just gutted their teams so that their numbers could look good, because their numbers were down, right? And I was wondering this myself. I'm like, how are all these consultancies doing so great when we're seeing all these major brands pulling back spend? Well, now we see what their great was. They were manipulating the books. They were letting all these people go as their customers were trimming back their services. And he said, we didn't do that. We put everything into like keeping our team intact, helping float through a challenging time, as we did as well. And he's like, I felt it was the right thing to do. I felt like that an employer that really cared about their team would sacrifice and struggle through this time to take care of the team, when all of our competitors didn't. Like, they cut staff. If it made the books a lot better, you go. People had to go. He's like, but now, like, my team isn't paying me back, because now that the money's starting to flow back into these bigger competitors, they're coming around and throwing a few extra dollars at my team, and they're going. And so the reason why I'm skeptical is because over the years, I've heard from countless people that have said, Jason, I am so sick of working for this type of company. I'm constantly traveling. I don't have time to spend with my kids. I'm stressed out. I'm burnt out. I just can't do it anymore. I'm like, you know what? There's another avenue out there. You can find more of a mom and pop boutique agency. The pay is really good, but it's not going to be maxed out like you're at your current employer. And 99 times out of 100 in these conversations, they said, I want that, and I want everything my current employer is giving me. And I want to be really careful with this conversation, not to say that it's like you have to exchange one thing for another, that you have to like not get paid. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that there is a price you have to pay oftentimes for those high end salaries. And that is, you become a slave to that master. And if they need you to work 90 hours a week, damn it, you're going to work 90 hours a week. If they need you to get on a plane in 2 hours from now and spend 2 weeks, somewhere else, you're going to do it. And that's the price you pay. And if you're willing to make that exchange, then awesome, enjoy it. But if you have a problem with that, and there's another solution out there, but okay, maybe instead of making $10, I'm making $9.90, and you're not willing to give up that 10 cents, that's on you, man. And so that's why I'm skeptical, because I've heard from lots and lots of people that they're tired of the corporate system. They're tired of the way it's always been. They want a different way of doing business. They want a different lifestyle. But when it comes down to actually doing that, they're unwilling to give up the, quote, comforts of that lifestyle. It's this weird, toxic relationship they have with a bad employer that they know is bad for them, but they can't let it go. It's this abusive relationship that they can't walk away from, right? Like, think about the abusive relationship of like, he treats you like crap. Yeah, but then he took me out to this really fancy steak dinner, so I really love him. What? No, that's not how any of this works.
I have so many thoughts on that, because a lot of that revolves, and to get really, really personal here, it revolves around a lot of the conversations my wife and I have had over the last year. As you know, after the birth of our son, you know, we started talking about like what would it look like, you know, if she were to take a leave of absence for a few years. So one, we could just enjoy this time, but also, you know, so we're not constantly running. And as you know, we started looking at our budget, it became apparent we could do it. Now, there were some comforts we had to get rid of. And I mean, they were hard decisions. And one of the things we came to is we said, we'll always have the money for what we need, but maybe not everything that we want. Because you know, those things we want aren't always the things that you need. And and yeah, I think it's maybe not, you know, you bring up a good point, like a toxic relationship with an employer, but it's also, you know, I'm gonna say it because I personally went through this the last year, really trying to, you know, my wife and I working really, really hard that both of us didn't have to work. And where do we trim our personal budget? And like we had tough conversations with some family over some things that we're like, no, we can't contribute to that anymore. And I'm getting way too off topic here, but it kind of brought back some of those conversations of the last year of like what's more worthwhile. We had to make a judgment call. What's more worthwhile? Being extra comfortable with a lot of money, which we're still going to be chasing things, or being able to maybe slow down a bit in life and actually enjoy it because only one of us has to work.
Yeah. And it isn't too far off topic because it is a conversation that everyone needs to have as we think about this. And I think, unfortunately, we were taught to use one single metric to value our growth and worth as employees, and that is our salary. And unfortunately, employment and compensation is so much more complex than just salary. And because we've chosen that singular metric, it's been hard to value anything else above and beyond that. And you know, one of the greatest blessings for me was taking a massive pay cut, leaving Omniture and going to Spark Networks. It taught me that there was more to value than just the dollar amount on my paycheck. And it's a complicated calculation to make because yes, it's pay. But how much, when is enough? And when does that help us start to value other things? So sure, there's pay. Sure. Oh, there's time off policies, healthcare costs, equity, stock options, learning opportunities, growth, network expand. Like when you think about compensation and the value you're getting back from a company, it is so much more complicated than just the number on your paycheck. But we use the number on the paycheck to define our self-worth and to compare ourselves against others. Well, so-and-so is making this much money and I'm making less, so I'm not as good as them. That's stupid. You have no idea what situation they're in. Maybe they're working 80 hours a week and you're working 20. Does it still make sense to compare dollar for dollar? You know, you're in an amazing situation where you have autonomy, you have freedom of movement, you can define your own schedule. They're working 90 hours a week and they're told every Monday where they're going to fly to and spend the week, and they can't dictate anything. Does it still make sense for you to compare dollar to dollar what you're making? No, that's stupid. And so I think we need to get to a point where we get over this like ego where we're using the dollar amount on our paycheck to define our self-worth, because it is so much more complicated than that. And until we can get to that point, then we are going to be in this point where there's going to be this very loose, quote, loyalty between companies and employees. Because if Jim, all you do is you value yourself by the dollar amount on your 33-6 paycheck, I guarantee you there's 100 companies that would throw 10 more dollars at you. And if that's all you valued, you'd be gone in an instant. Right. And no one can get into a bidding game where they can like someone that's going to have billions of dollars. Ultimately, you're going to get to Apple or Google or someone that's willing to outbid everyone else. If that's what you value, there can never be really any loyalty.
No, because then it gets back to what we started to touch on last week is loyalty to the highest bidder. And another analogy, you brought up the abusive relationship, and yeah, he's not good for me, but yeah, he took me out to dinner, so I'm going to stick this through, kind of thing. It's also the same thing, like, again, when it comes to relationship, it's once a cheater, always a cheater, kind of thing. And kind of being loyal to the highest bidder, it's a total relationship of convenience, where it's like, oh yeah, he cheated on his last girlfriend with me, but he's not going to cheat on me. No, same thing. Well, on the employee side, okay, yeah, I was able to outbid somebody else to bring them in. They're only as loyal as long as I'm the highest bidder. And the same thing on the employee side. It's like, hey, yeah, they threw money at me to get me here. Do they truly value me, or do they think, oh, I could just throw money at somebody else to bring them in and replace me? Does that make sense?
It does, and the counter argument to this is, I guarantee there are people listening who are like, well, just pay your people more money. It's like, well, that's a different conversation. These things are not mutually exclusive. The more healthy part of the conversation is recognizing your employees and their contribution financially, but also knowing there's so much more that goes into that conversation. But again, unless both sides are willing to recognize that there's value to the entire package, then this is a completely moot point, because there will always be something. You can continually throw money at your employees, but there will always be someone that will be willing to throw more. So if your only goal is to chase the money, there's never going to be any loyalty. There's never going to be any stability. And honestly, both sides are going to be incredibly, incredibly unhappy in that process. So I think that's a big part of the conversation. Another part of it that we started out the podcast talking about was this sense that we don't really have like the golden watch retirement ceremony. And I think it's important to recognize that it's not necessarily a failure when people leave your team or leave your company even, that as long as you're giving employees what they need in that moment and you're constantly investing in them to grow and become more valuable, you shouldn't keep them down from a sense of loyalty, right? I think there's this fake loyalty from a company perspective saying, I have to keep this person on my team, they can never leave. I think it's an incredibly dangerous perspective. Rather than seeing loyalty as this impermanent relationship, to me, I think loyalty is more between people. And that can transcend teams, that can transcend companies. We've seen it firsthand. We had John who left, and it would have been very easy for me to feel offended and upset, and it was a failure, and for us to try to like force him to stay. But we are loyal to John. We're not loyal to 33 Sticks employee John. And when he left, we verbalized that. Look, it's like, look, we're loyal to you. That loyalty doesn't change based on this legal arrangement that we have. And we supported him in going to work for another company and continued to be a huge advocate of him. And then it paid off. He learned a ton and came back. I think about the same scenario for myself back when I was at Omniture and I decided to leave. One of the executives in the company said, it doesn't matter what we talk about, but the only solution that we can come to is that you're going to stay here. And I said, that doesn't make sense to me. I said, I've really thought this out, and you may not see it, but I feel like I will be fundamentally more valuable to Omniture leaving the company than staying here. And I think I've proven that out over the years. I was able to go to a company and build out a world-class analytics platform using their platform. I was able to become a voice in the industry, which I don't know how to quantify the impact, but I'm sure it's been quite large. And I think we should feel comfortable with that, as saying, it's not a separation that Jason and Omniture now hate each other and we have no loyalty. No. I still had a tremendous amount and still have a tremendous amount of loyalty to that brand for what they invested in me. And that transcends our employment. And I think that it's a very real shift that we need to look at. We need to get out of this mindset that we're going to have this gold watch ceremony 50 years from now. And if we don't, then people aren't loyal to each other. No, the loyalty is between people, not between entities.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. And it gives you a lot to think about as far as, um, uh, I like the concept of, being loyal to the person, because at a client, we actually just saw the same thing. Someone had left, and I mean, within 5 weeks, 6 weeks, they're coming back very, very quickly. Things didn't work out where they were, where they went, and they came right back, and they were welcomed with open arms. So it's really cool to see when that happens.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to your point of like this different way of doing business back when, mom and pop treating employees like family. If they're family, it doesn't matter where they go into the world. They're still your family. They may live next door or they may live around the world. Just because they've moved somewhere doesn't mean they stop being family. And again, we've been attacked for taking this viewpoint, but I feel like it is the right way to view things. That it's not about employees as components in a system. It's about, these are real people, and the loyalty should be there. And while you're part of the company, yeah, you're writing for that brand. And we had that topic of a previous show. But in speaking about loyalty, the loyalty really is to the person. And, to think that loyalty is defined by a legal relationship is just to destroy the concept of loyalty. That's saying, well, I'm only going to be loyal to you as long as you're an employee here. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that, right? Like, if I truly appreciate you and invest in you and care about Jim, it shouldn't matter where you are. That the fact that you do something else or go somewhere else shouldn't destroy that loyalty, and vice versa, right? From the employee back to the company perspective, just because that relationship is severed, now all of a sudden, now I hate the company, now I don't want the company to be successful. The best opportunities of people leaving companies is to not view it as being disloyal, but seeing as an opportunities to sow that loyalty on a broader stage, right? And go out and talk about, yeah, I'm still a huge fan of this, company. Or we see it in sports every now and then, where you see someone go to another team, and it's there's still a level of support for it. I don't, you're probably not, you don't follow soccer as much as I do.
I don't know.
But maybe there's something similar in hockey, which I know you're a big fan of, and baseball. But in soccer, there's this really cool concept of respect for the teams that you played on before. Again, because it's not that just because you leave now all of a sudden you're enemies or that loyalty is broken. That's still part of who you are. That's still part of your history. And one of the beautiful things about soccer with a lot of players is that loyalty remains intact. And I'll send you a video after this, but one of the unwritten rules to show the respect of that loyalty is that you don't celebrate against your previous team. So if you come and you score a goal against your old club, there's no big celebrations. It's very, almost apologetic that you scored against them, as a sign of respect and loyalty for that previous relationship that is still part of who you are and is part of where you're at today.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I know in the NHL, most teams, if not all, when, say, a long-time player moves on, either free agency, trade, or whatever, when they come back, there's, typically a few-minute tribute. They'll show highlights, the crowd cheers, and whatnot. It's like kind of like a, hey, thanks for the memories, but and good luck. Now, I can't say there's the unwritten rule of, not celebrating when you score a goal against your rival team. And, there's a bit of a rivalry there too. You'll see some ribbing going back and forth. And honestly, sometimes it depends upon how the relationship or the employment ended. Like,
For
if
sure,
there was, if it was like a bitter divorce, it might not be as much, but yeah, like there is, I think in a lot of sports, there is that level of sportsmanship where they acknowledge the time spent. But then there's also a bit of the rivalry, like, I'm going to show you why you probably should have kept me.
Yeah, I mean that definitely plays into it. And not to say that you're not trying your hardest to defeat your opponent in the moment, but when the whistle blows, when the deal is done, we're all still people, right? And you love to see it in sports where, especially hockey. I love the line after big hockey games where, you know, there's a mutual show of respect that, like, we can fight it out on the ice for 3 periods and go at it. But at the end, you know, we respect each other as people, as competitors, and as part of a fraternity that bonds us together. And that's where that loyalty lies. You know, we want to beat each other, but at the end, we respect the hell out of each other, and we're going to show that respect. To me, I love those moments, and there's such a parallel with business that I think we can learn from, is that when you're playing for the team and you have that team's logo on them, you go all out for that team to get a victory. But that doesn't mean that when you move on, that human bond is broken. And you see it so many times when players go back to old clubs. When they do it right, they're often celebrated. You know, I think, and there's a few moments in hockey where I've remembered it, where a longtime player has moved on and then come back and really have been embraced, and they, you know, really love and appreciate the time they spent there. That's that humanistic element. It's like, you know, yes, you know, you're writing for a different brand now, and we appreciate you writing for that brand, but the loyalty isn't between brands, it's between humans.
Yeah. And I've actually cheered, like, for other teams to win the Stanley Cup when my team is not playing. And I remember there was the defenseman, Chemo Teeman, and the Flyers picked him up. He played 6 or 7 years here. And then near the end of, like, one of his last years, he was out for most of the season with blood clots. And then toward the trade deadline, he got the all clear to play, and the Flyers were out of the playoffs. So they traded him because he had never won the championship. They traded him to the Chicago Blackhawks, who had a good chance. And, like, this entire city, you know, was rooting for the Chicago Blackhawks to win, to see him win. Or at least a lot of the Flyers fans I know were cheering for the Chicago Blackhawks to say, like, yeah, you worked your ass off here. It's a shame you didn't win it here, but you're going to, you know, we know you're going to be retiring after the season. So, like, we're hoping you win it.
And I think that's the beauty of this conversation, and it kind of wraps everything together, that, you know, while you have that sweater on, while you have that brand on your jersey, your uniform, that you're fiercely loyal to that brand. But loyalty in general transcends that, and it transcends the game. And that's where I think we have a really good opportunity to shift the business landscape, but because that hasn't been the case. Like, loyalty has been between entities instead of humans.
And I mean, the best story I know of in hockey for at least the last 30 years of that happening is Ray Bourque, longtime defenseman for the Boston Bruins. He played every year, you know, every year of his career except a year and a half with the Boston Bruins. And at this point, the Bruins, like, they were in the doldrums for a period of time, and he was nearing retirement. They knew he was going to retire, and they traded him to the Colorado Avalanche, you know, with the hope of go win one. And the Avalanche lost in the playoffs. So some of their key players, like, dude, come back one more year. We're going to win it. Come back one more year. And he's like, okay, I'll come back. And that was, like, kind of their mantra was win it for him. He is not, you know, he just got traded here last year, but we know what he's done in this league. We got to help him win one before he retires. And his last game was when the Colorado Avalanche, like, I watched that clip, and, like, that's sportsmanship at its finest.
Yeah.
Because there's, you know, you want to talk about traditions in sports. When a team wins the Stanley Cup, the team's captain, which is a defined role, is the player that goes over and receives the cup from the commissioner. And, you know, and then of course there's like a line down there. Well, they won. Joe Sakic went and grabbed it and told Ray Bourque, "You come over first," and he was the first one to lift it. You know, and it's like that, like that fraternity, that brotherhood of a craft, of playing a sport like that at a high level. You know, this is someone who, you know, in movies, when they talk about sports, the newcomer is often ostracized. this was something where it's like, yeah, you haven't been here through all the battles with us, but we know what else you've done, and we're going to help you win.
Yeah. No, it's so awesome, and we could probably spin up a whole series on the lessons from sports that we can learn, that we can use in business. But from this concept of loyalty, it's something that so many sports organizations do so well, and so many business organizations do so poorly. And we've seen it in our own little center of our own little corner of the universe, in that, in this desire to be fiercely loyal to the brand, which again, that's great. Like, we want to give our all to the brand. But when the game is over, we're still humans. And unfortunately, I've seen that sense of loyalty, which we can argue whether it's real or not, force humans to be really bad to each other. And that's what I love the most about sports. And people think I'm weird. And I had this conversation on Twitter the other day. I said, it makes me sad when broadcasts break away from the end of games, because it's one of my most favorite parts of any sporting event is after the final whistle. Watching the players from the opposing teams interact with each other. I love that so much, because it shows the humanistic element, again, that we can fight to win the same account. We can be fiercely loyal for each of our brands, and we think we do it better. But at the end of the day, we're human, and we can still want to win. But at the final whistle, we're still humans, and we still love and appreciate each other as humans. And being able to see that mutual respect, I think, is something that is so sorely missing from business. And I've seen friendships destroyed by people going to one brand or another. You can be loyal to the brand. You can ride for the brand and still have loyalty to humans and be good to humans. And that's something I think we really need to think about.
Yeah. And I think that is a great spot to end it on.
Awesome.
So this has been really fun. And I just pulled up that clip. I'm going to send it to you.
Do it.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. So cool. Let's go ahead and wrap up there, and we will catch everybody later.
All right. Sounds good. See you.
All right. See ya.